The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 25th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Jesus said, "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then the owner went away, and the one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them, and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me the 5 talents, and see, I have made 5 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, and good and faith and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And the one with 2 talents also came forward, saying, 'Master, you have handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents.' And his master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours.' But his master replied, 'You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I do not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.' The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ." So today's gospel is another one of those happy ones. And it's always troubling to me, as I've said often, when we have these parables that end with someone being cast out into the outer darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth, because there is that part of me that knows my heart better than anyone else knows it. And that part of my heart says, you never have been good enough for this. You never have been good enough to be a pastor. You never have been good enough to amount to much. Eric, you never really have been a good enough guy to feel like people should look up to you, because, I kind of often describe my personality type as jerk, or depending on the company I'm in, something a little stronger than that. And it's not because I want to be mean, even though I have the capacity. And it's not because I want to hurt people's feelings, even though I have the capacity. It's not even because I try to be challenging, and I certainly have that capacity. But it's because I try not to be mean. I try not to hurt people's feelings. I try not to be challenging. And so often in my life, I find myself having to say, listen, I didn't mean it the way it came out. And shouldn't a pastor be able to sometimes guard themselves a little better than that? Shouldn't we be able to put on the nice face? Shouldn't a pastor be able to put it on the good church persona and feel comfortable in that? And so, we call that sometimes imposter syndrome, where we feel like if anybody ever really saw me, then they wouldn't think I amounted to much. And certainly I feel that way because I see me. And a lot of times I feel like I don't amount to much. And so I hear about this outer darkness. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not like I spend all the time, oh, I'm so awful. I'm so, I don't spend all that time, every moment of every day thinking how bad I am. But it is important to recognize that when you spend your life around people who are trying to do good, And you find yourself to be a person who has the capacity to throw a monkey wrench into things. I tell people that God gave me a hammer and a guitar, and I'm just as likely to use one as the other, and often both at the same time. And someone this week to me said, when I told that to them, "You must break a lot of guitars then." And I said, "Well, you got to use what you've been given." And so I imagine that there are those people out there, and this is the 10 talent person maybe, who feel absolutely comfortable being entrusted with these tremendous gifts, who feel absolutely comfortable and maybe feel worthy of receiving 5 talents to do with what they desire, so that when their master comes back, they can be deemed the good and trustworthy slave to whom little has been entrusted and they have been faithful. So now many things will be entrusted to them, invited to enter into the joy of their master. A lot of times I feel more like the 2 talent servant. The 2 talent servant has also been entrusted with a great deal. And, I may not necessarily feel like the 10 talent person or the 5 talent person, but I can do a lot with a little. And so I hear this one, and I can kind of see myself in that one, and know that I've never been given anything that I haven't tried to do something with. And I can see myself there, but I also see in myself this 1 talent person who received, granted, it was a fifth of what the one who received the most had, and half of what the one who received 2 had. But a talent is not a paltry sum. A talent is years worth of salary. This is the equivalent of winning a small lottery probably, and having the opportunity to do with that money something that could really build it into something. And the other thing that I know about me is there are those parts of myself that resist authority, and that sometimes will rebel against people trying to do nice things for me. Not because doing nice things is bad, but sometimes it's because of the one who gives it. Now, that's something I have done. Someone has offered me an opportunity, and I just didn't appreciate them, and I've squandered one of those opportunities, at least in my lifetime. And so I think this is where I connect with this slave, where this master gives him years' worth of salary to do with as he pleases. And he is so frustrated by whatever it is that he buries it, because he just knows there's a trick in this. And what's fascinating to me is, in South Carolina, we have a saying that you cut off your nose to spite your face. And, that's exactly what this guy did. So if he thinks that this master is someone who's not very fair, if he thinks this master is someone who doesn't really take care of the people around him, if he really thinks these things about this master, then one of the things he must know about this guy is that he is not a particularly tolerant person when it comes to being insulted. And if I were to walk up to you and say, I know that you are someone who gathers what they do not sow. I know someone who reaps what they did not plant. I know that you are someone who takes Amazon boxes off of the neighbor's porch. I know that you are someone who will take a parking ticket off of your windshield and put it on another windshield. I know that you are somebody who would hide every bit of what you make just to keep someone you love from wanting anything from you. Because even though you love them, I know you're not very nice, and I know you're not very generous. Imagine if I were to say that to you, how would you respond to this? How did this guy expect his master to respond to this? This is not anything to work with. And so, of course, the master comes back and said, "Well, you knew, did you, that I reap what I do not sow, and I gather what I did not plant? Why didn't you just put it in the bank?" And I think, at least the way I've read this parable for the last couple of times I've preached on it, that the reason he didn't put it in the bank is because he didn't want the guy to have the satisfaction of seeing any increase. And he figured that maybe he wouldn't punish him if he just gave back exactly what he had brought. Now, the other side of that is maybe he would have if he hadn't been so insulted. Think about this for a minute. What is this parable really trying to get at? Is this parable saying that God doesn't like the poor? That God prefers, people who are able to provide increase, and that those who aren't able to provide any increase, well, they're out of luck? No, I don't think so. I think what we hear out of this is that each of us, each individual has been entrusted with a great gift that only we have gotten, that only we can work with, that only we can spend, that only we can invest. Certainly, the master could have made something out of that money that he left with the slaves, but he wanted to give the slaves an opportunity to do something for themselves. Wanted to give them an opportunity to feel like they had accomplished something. Wanted them to have an opportunity to have a little taste of what it was to enter into the joy of their master. And I think if the guy had invested it in the bank, the master would have probably accepted that, because at least would have chosen to do something with it. He would have chosen to invest it somewhere. He would have put it to some good use. At the very least, if it's sitting in a bank, the bank can use that money to act as collateral against loans. But if it's buried in the ground, what good is it? If it's buried in the ground, how can it do anybody any good? Because you might bury seeds, but they sprout crops. Anything in the ground is worthless and good as dead anyway. And so what I hear in this isn't that we've been called to produce and produce and produce, and that our worth is according to our competency, or that our worth is according to our production, or that our worth is according to what return we produce for the master. What I hear in this gospel lesson isn't that our worth has anything to do with how skilled we are at using it. The only thing I hear God demanding in this parable is that we use it somehow. Because if we take what God has given us and just bury it in the ground, we might as well be dead already. Because if we're so miserable that we're going to blame God for giving us even the breath in our body, we're already weeping and gnashing our teeth in the outer darkness, just like that man was who was waiting on that day when he knew that he was going to say, I know what kind of man you are, with the full knowledge that his master would then prove it. Now, the good news is the love that God gives us is free. It has nothing to do with whether we invest it or not. It has nothing to do with whether we return it or not. But it's also true that if we're given this gift and we do nothing with it, what good does it do us? I remember a song that we learned when I was a kid. Love is something if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Oh, love is something if you give it away that you end up having more. And if I hold that love in my heart and I hold that love to myself, not only does it not spread, not only does that love not generate something, but love that we hold in our heart and we don't share with anybody else withers and becomes unhealthy. We see the TV shows and the movies where someone has a crush on somebody and they stalk them. That is love unspent that then becomes something that is twisted and does not look like itself. I think ultimately that's what this one talent person represents, is the ones who have potential that God believes in and absolutely refuse to do a single thing with it for whatever reason it is. And what happens at the end of this parable isn't God punishing them, but God recognizing already where they have been. That doesn't leave me any more comfortable, by the way. It still leaves me frustrated a little bit, because I certainly want everybody to end up with that love. I also know that the, the very fact that I recognize this is one of the very first steps in investing what God has given me. God has given you an amazing gift. Only you. But it's not a gift for you. The gifts that God gives are for the people around us. The gifts that God gives are for the sake of the world. The gift that God gives is a gift that we have been called and compelled and commanded to share. How is it that this week you will take what God has given you and spread it around, knowing that it is about the only resource that when you spend it, you get more? Amen.